You know, I'm really glad today to have Dr. Choi back with me. He was really glad to be with us yesterday, and who knew that we could get a university president to be with us 2 days in a row, because I know he has a lot going on. You know, we've talked about workforce development broadly and how to integrate this with broadband, but we want Dr. Choi to really talk a little bit more about how higher education and the UM system are working across the nation and the state on workforce development issues. Dr. Choi, we welcome you to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marshall. We are so proud of experts like Dr. Patillo who are making a contributions throughout the state of Missouri, especially when it comes to economic development that is underpinned by workforce development. And public research universities, like the ones that we have in our UM system, are critical for economic development. And each year, the University of Missouri system contributes $5.4 billion to the local economy in Missouri. And that's incredible. What also underpins that is our ability to train engineers, nurses, teachers, historians, and lawyers who are going to make that important contribution to our economy going forward. And as many of you know, we are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, where the cyber-physical systems are taking over and transforming the way we work and the way we live. Now, underlying all of the technologies that are part of the fourth industrial revolution is data and innovation, whether it's autonomous vehicles, precision health, artificial intelligence, or new platforms for sharing in the sharing economy. That data and innovation is key. Now, 50 years ago, companies had time to adapt to new technologies. So 50 years ago, the average life expectancy for a Fortune 500 company was 75 years. But now, that is cut into 15 years. And those companies that harness the power of data and innovation, and with the workforce that supports data and innovation, are able to thrive, and some are not. Remember names like Blockbuster, Sears? More than a century ago, Sears was the Amazon with its mail order delivery. But now, because they could not keep up with the data and innovation technologies of Amazon, Sears is no longer a brand in the United States. It's kind of sad, but it is the reality that we face. So it's very important for all of us, whether we are educators in extension or educators working at our 4 campuses, to infuse into the education of the next generation data and innovation. Whether we're teaching 4-H students or doctoral students, that ability to manipulate and harness the importance of data is going to be critically important. So I believe that we are on a good path at the University of Missouri system, working with Extension to translate that education based on innovation into the classroom, but also into the community. So we're very excited, Marshall.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Again, thank you for being a part of us. And as you've really captured well, higher education has a big place to play in this, and we're a big partner in that. So thank you so much for being with us and for your time and really your commitment not only to workforce development and to not only the university, but the state of Missouri. Really, really important. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
You know, now we're going to show a video that really highlights the importance and impact of workforce development in Missouri. These 3 stories of Missourians whose lives and livelihoods are changed because of people and programs in our state that think about workforce development. So let's take a look at some real Missourians and what's going on in their lives.
I went through a program called a BUD program, and it was a 5-week program, and they take you to different construction trades. And in the process, as going through all the trades, you get to sign up for the program for each trade. Before I became a laborer, I was a certified forklift operator, and then I was a part-time chef in the evening. And it was hard making ends meet because it was always demanding. I worked a lot of hours, and you know, it took 2 jobs to support me and my family at that time. So since transitioning from that craft to this, I've been able to save and You know, it provides an easy path for my family, you know, financially, and it's been a real good experience for me. I got 5 kids. I got a 14-year-old, I got a 13-year-old, I got a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and I got a 4-month-old. That's why it's important for me to keep employment, you know, and to come to work every day and do the things that I need to do. If you got someone that's willing to provide you with the opportunity to be successful, you should take that. Going through the BUD program, it provided me with that opportunity. It provided me with the opportunity to become financially stable versus working in a normal everyday job that I didn't see those things. And the difference for me now is that I have a career now. You know, but then I had a job, and to me that's a big difference.
Once a Marine, always a Marine. I still have lifelong friends. My grandfather and my father showed up to my graduation. My grandfather served in World War II, in the invasion of D-Day. My father served 22 years in the Air Force. He was an F-15 pilot, served in Desert Storm. So I served over in Iraq. I did 9 months over there as a Harrier, AV-8B Harrier engine and fuel systems mechanic. I mean, I wouldn't change it for the world. I met a lot of great people there. Happy to serve my country and, you know, do what I had to do. I got out of the Marine Corps in October of 2007. I had a great job with Boeing, you know, painting 747s and 787s. You know, really the pinnacle of, I was a painter, the pinnacle of my career, but unfortunately I got laid off from there after about 7 years, and took a big hit financially. You know, I had a child on the way, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and kind of did odd jobs for a while, painting, a lot of industrial, residential, commercial stuff, but it wasn't really where I wanted to be. Wasn't making the kind of, you know, money I wanted to make, and I decided that, you know, I needed to make a change, do something to, you know, help myself, help my family, and that's why I decided, you know, go to a trade school and learn a new skill. I mean, yeah, the veteran assistance has helped me tremendously. You know, I mean, I was happy the day I got accepted for it. You know, I mean, it really helped me to be able to move forward with the things I want to do and to improve my life. I'm so grateful that, you know, I have this program, because, you know, it just improves mine and my family's life.
Before I became into laboring, I was working at Sunship Automotive Group as a receptionist, not making that much money, $10 an hour, struggling to see how I was going to pay my next bill and where this is going to come from. And I knew I wanted better. So I was just like, what can I do to get this opportunity? So I found out about this job at a job fair. I seen a sign that said laborers, and it said what they make annually a year, and it was a female standing there. And I asked her, what is laborers? And she said, well, we need more females in the field. She explained the job title to me, what they do, and she said, I got good news. We have a local here, and we have the apprenticeship school here, where she walked me over to the table where I met Ronnie Griffin. I met Josh Wright, head of those Local 110 and the apprenticeship program. A person want to be like, okay, I can, you know, take care of myself. I don't have to depend on nobody else. I don't have to wait on anybody else. So I work hard. I come to work every day. And I know how I feel to go home now. You be tired, but guess what? You're tired for the right reason. You put the work in, you make the decent pay, and everything works out, you know. The benefits, again, are awesome. I started in the trade in June of 2018. In July of 2018, after I got my first couple big checks, my mother never been on an airplane. So I bought her a plane ticket with me, my brother's birthday, and my dad, and I took them down to Texas, San Antonio, Texas. My mom was so nervous. So she was kind of freaking out, but it was cute, because I was like, Mom, just calm down, because I fly all the time. So just to see her expression and happy, and I paid for everything, and they didn't have to pay for nothing. When I took them to Texas, I covered things there too, and it just made me feel good. Like, you know, they're getting the experience that I gave them, and I'm happy to do it. You know, it's like, I'm happy you asked that question. You took me back 2 years.
3 great stories. Stories that not only tell a story about someone wanting to make a good living, but somebody wanting to contribute, to have dignity, and also improve their lives and the lives of others. You know, that's what workforce development is really all about. I'm really pleased to have Dr. Choi join me again as we are going to now shift into a different part of our program. And Dr. Choi, I know the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry has been a great friend and partner since you've been here and really precedes both of us. They've been great with the MU Extension, the University of Missouri here in Columbia, as well as our other campuses and even the UM system broadly. And they are the sponsor again of today's program. So I'd like to thank them again and ask you to really talk about that partnership and its importance as we go to our next part of the program.
Thank you, Marshall. It's a very strong partnership. And as you saw in those videos, the work that the Missouri Chamber does with Extension and our partners throughout the state empower individuals like Scott, Delisha, and the last person is Sammy for all of the important work that they can do. And you saw in them the potential for them to reach that milestone of getting a job and providing for their family. And that's why the work is so important going forward. And we can't have a more important and more committed partner to that effort than the Missouri Chamber. And I met Dan about 3 years ago, and he has been so supportive of all of our activities, whether it's in Extension or for the University of Missouri system to become the first partner for Intern Connect. And Dan, through his leadership, has enabled the Chamber to be selected as the 2019 National State Chamber of the Year. That takes a lot of hard work and deep, deep commitment. And Dan is also working with his partners throughout the state to implement a very bold strategic plan called Missouri 2030, where by 2030, we would have achieved the goal of becoming the go-to place in the United States where companies come to find the talent and the solutions that they need for the problems that they have. Dan is a proud graduate, not of one of our universities, but University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School of Business. And Dan, thank you for your leadership, thank you for your sponsorship, and thank you for bringing us the outstanding speaker, Ted Abernathy.
Moon, thanks so much, and Marshall, thanks so much. And you're right, this is a fantastic partnership that we have. We are all in this together. Missouri can't succeed without a very successful university, and we're excited about continuing into the future with that and with you. And that those stories that you heard on the just prior to Marshall and Moon speaking are really just, they're the truth about what's going on out there. And great to hear people succeeding. As Moon mentioned, we started a strategic plan initiative about 5 years ago, which we called Missouri 2030. And at the time, we had come through 2008 and weathered that storm and grown the organization to the point where the board said we really need to do something to reinvest back in the state. And to their credit, they put up the mortgage on this thing and said, what do we need to do to move Missouri forward? And we looked at how we stood as a state and brought in a friend of mine, the president of the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce. There's a lot of North Carolina connections here today, but brought in the president of the North Carolina Chamber, who brought in his consultant, a gentleman named Ted Abernathy, who you're going to hear from shortly. And they presented to our board and told us that we were ranked 42nd in job creation, 43rd in state GDP growth, and 39th in per capita income. And there was a moment of silence, and then people were saying, are we really that bad? I thought we were in the middle. And our board members were saying that. And now that, the scoreboard doesn't lie. And so they said, we need to do this. We need to have a vision. We need to chart a course for this state. So in addition to bringing Ted on to help us create this and structure it, we contracted with the Gallup organization to do research on what were those drivers that we needed to focus on. And they conducted a survey of a minimum of 1,000 CEOs across the state. And we came up with 4 areas. Not really surprising, but workforce was number one. We've got the jobs, we can't find the talent, or the talent doesn't stay. We need to get more competitive in things like our judicial climate and regulatory process, et cetera. We need infrastructure badly, not just roads and bridges, but ports and broadband build out to rural Missouri especially. And fourth was uniting the business community. And there can't be 2 better entities to do that, in my opinion, than the University of Missouri and the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, getting business and education together. So that was extremely important. I know Ted's obviously been working with us for 5 years. He's a great resource. He's really been the principal author of 3 reports that we've issued, one on workforce, one on technology in Missouri, which we have a great story to tell about being a top 10 state in technology opportunities. And the most recent we issued last week was our transportation report, which had 22 recommendations on how to move forward, and not just funding for roads and bridges. Yes, that's mission critical, but other specific items on ports, on brownfield redevelopment, these types of things that will create jobs and will give us the infrastructure to position ourselves as a great logistics and supply chain factor in the entire country. So Ted's been a great friend. He's been a great advisor, a great source of knowledge on trends and what's going on around the country and the world. He's got very good chops in economic development. He ran the Research Triangle in North Carolina, did economic development in Baltimore, and is helping states like ours around the country right now. He's also helping out with our National Association of State Chambers with economic updates and trend spotting. And it's a real privilege and honor to have him here for extension today. And I think you're going to really enjoy his presentation. So with that, I'd turn it over to Ted and have him take it away. Ted, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot, Dan. It's nice to be with all of you today. It's when we talk about workforce, I was asked today to talk about finding the future, the next new normal. And new normals are interesting things to try to figure out because they're complicated. But when we add on top of that talent, which I always talk about as the biggest conundrum that we all face anyway, that trying to find someone's next new talent is a difficult thing. And we'd love to find simple solutions, but I'm going to spend the first part of my talk this morning talking about how complicated this is. Sorry about that, but as a university, that comes natural to you guys. Then I'm going to spend the second half of it talking about what we see as the trends that are out there. And as Dan says, we spend a lot of time on trends, workforce, searching, I guess, and strategic plans and those types of things. And we do them all over the country, and there are a lot of similarities. And the biggest similarities typically are the issues. So I want you to think for a minute about the word conundrum, and I want you to think about what actually is workforce or talent development. What does it really mean to do that? And just put it in your head, get a sentence or two. And now I want to try to make it more complicated for you, because the demand for talent is pretty simple. When the International Economic Development people do their annual survey with area development, the top thing was highway accessibility this year, but the next 3 things were the availability of skilled labor, that labor's cost, and the quality of life to attract labor. Last week at the annual conference of all the economic developers, thousands of them around the country virtually, a new report was released, and skilled labor and labor cost and that strong quality of life were right there. Economic developers understand, as do state chambers and others, that you cannot be a competitive place unless you have enough skilled labor with the right skills. So, what does that mean? Well, I have in my career run the Southern Growth Policy Board, which is the think tank for Southern governors. I have been the policy advisors for for all the governors in the South. Been, as Dan said, advising state chambers of commerce. I have never met an elected official or an economic developer who didn't want to fix workforce. Everybody says that right away. Well, we'll just fix our workforce. And every new governor that has ever been elected has workforce as one of the things. They're going to streamline it. They're going to fix it. They're going to make sure that it's simple and easy. And I also never met a business who didn't need workers with more skills. So the issue ought to be pretty simple. We all have it as a top priority. But once we crawl into the workforce issue, then the complexity of it typically creates a complexity paralysis for us. We crawl in and we look for silver bullets, and we don't end up making it much better unless we can deconstruct our expectations. So when people say workers need better skills, what do they mean? And I think this is the beginning of the confusion that we face. And so our organization, after listening to thousands of business talk to us and thousands of workforce boards tell us what they wanted and dealing with educators, we decided that the skills fall into 5 categories. There's basic knowledge. That's what's taught in reading and writing and the basics that would look like the core curriculum of what was done when I was in school in K through 12, or in my case, 1 through 12. Then there's those elusive life skills. Several people have already mentioned that this morning. Whether you got it at the soda shop with your dad or somewhere else, you learned life skills that were about reliability. They were about honesty. They were about self-motivation. And we want people to have those skills today. Just past that are some more, sometimes referred to as soft skills, but they're transferable work skills. They're the issues of communication, of teamwork, of problem solving, of being able to work with new ideas. Next, job skills. And this is what you typically think of when you first think of a job skill. You want a college professor to be able to do research and be able to think. You want a phlebotomist to take blood. You want a bricklayer to lay bricks. Those are the specific set of skills to do the exact job. They're not typically transferable. The work skills, the life skills, the basic knowledges are transferable across all skills. And then finally, there's an overlaying layer today called future skills. This is the ability to work with technology, to deal with people that are of different backgrounds than you, to continuously learn and relearn new skills and forget the way you used to do other things. So those are the skills. And the reason it's important to segment them is the way you address making them better with an individual or a community are very different. So I want to make it a little more complicated. When we interview employers, this is the way they think about it. So that's the way I think about it before in our team. But employers think about 4 sets of skills. They think about personal skills, honesty, integrity, all those things I said were life. They think about work skills. They want that teamwork. They want that communication. But even more now, a sales mentality and an empathy and emotional intelligence. They want people who can think. I hear that from employers. The 2 things you hear regularly is, I want someone who can show up, and that's the pejorative of it. But the other thing employers say is, I want someone who can think, that can problem solve, that can critical think, that can use applied learning, be creative, be adaptive. And that thinking part is more and more critical. And then finally, those technical job skills. So when we measure those in the future, that's going to be one of the real issues, is how do we measure these different type of skills? How do we quantify what someone knows? Now, a lot of research has been done on the types of skills specifically. And the bottom line is that cognitive skills are now more important than manual skills, and non-routine skills are more important than routine skills. So if it's the same old thing, it's not as important as if you can do new things. Then, as a society, economic development and workforce development, we think, well, all right, we'll build ourselves a pipeline. We'll have a pipeline for talent. That talent pipeline will be there. But who contributes to a person's skills? How do they learn all of those things I just talked about? Well, they learn them from their family, from their community, from their teachers, from their clergy, from their neighbors, from the kids they play with. And throughout their life, even before they're born, neonatal care and good pregnancy health are part of helping a child be ready once they're born to learn. Then it's all those people. It's also daycare and pre-K and all the parent training, the reading to kids. You get into school and it's all about the skill development, the academic foundation, whether or not they learn or are exposed to careers. And then afterwards, it's whether they went in the Army or went to a job or went to higher ed, it's how do you learn skills that are in those buckets. Now that's all confusing. And on top of that, it's a moving target because we have automation and robotics and the change of jobs. We have slowing birth rates and aging baby boomers and stagnant productivity. And quite honestly, most people just look at workforce and they throw up their hands and they say, I don't know what to do. It's too hard. There's too many moving parts. And we would argue that the way you eat an elephant is one step at a time. If your problem is that kids are getting to kindergarten without the skills necessary, you work on improving your pre-K or your daycare. If they're coming out of high school without understanding their careers, you improve the CTE and the career work. If it's thinking skills, you put that in the curriculum. You have to do a lot of different things. And so there's no magic bullet that, the college professors ought to be teaching better or fourth grade teachers aren't doing a good job. It's that there's a complex set of things that make a person ready to go and if they're ready and they're the best employee in the world at 22, by the time they're 42, they will have to have been reskilled again. Maybe they have the work skills and the personal skills, life skills that work, but they're going to have to learn new job skills, just like all of us had to learn Zoom before, in the last year. I do a lot of public speaking and all. I had used Skype. I had used Zoom one time prior to this. I did 4 Zoom presentations yesterday. So we're learning new skills in order to be productive as we go forward. So now let's think about what forward means, because there were trends coming into this year. We did a lot of trend work. We do it for a lot of clients. And the 2 trends that I talked about the most coming into this year were acceleration, the fact that everything was moving faster than it had in the past, and constant disruption. And disruption is what I'll focus on for just a minute. Disruption is a lot of things. There's technological disruption around what's going on with the Internet of Things and robotics and blockchain and virtual reality. And eventually AI. There's social disruption happening with people working longer, having fewer kids. So we have less new workers coming into the workforce, family situations being different. Work has changed. There's more gig, there's more other things. And then there were global issues that this is a slide from February this year, that we were subject to cybersecurity issues or weather or resource issues or governance or pandemics that could upend our world. And I'm not we try to look at trends, and there wasn't a trend that there would be a pandemic this year, but there were always trends that whatever happened, we're so interconnected, and interconnectivity is another trend, that if something happened anywhere, it was going to happen to us. So then COVID hit. And now we're dealing with it every day, and we probably all know people who have been impacted or companies that have been impacted. We've all been impacted. But now the question is, what's next? What happens? And what does that mean for workforce? So I want to talk about sort of the next new normal in post-pandemic, and do so simply today. We track about 20 major trends we think will happen in the future, but I'm going to talk about 4 of them for the workforce going forward and try to just get those to tee up our conversations. The first is the concept that everything has gone remote, and that isn't a surprise to anybody. Sort of the remote rules is going to be the model for a while forward. When we think about work, we'll talk about that in a second, but it's not just work, it's everything. It's remote banking, it's remote entertainment, remote exercise, groceries, medicine. You think about what we've done, we've sent about 30 to 40% of all Americans home to work. Now, that's not everybody, but that's everybody we thought we could. And before this all started, only about 7% of people worked from home. The expectation is that after we have a vaccine, everybody's vaccinated, and whatever the next new normal is, we're back to it, that we're still going to be talking about almost 30% of the people working from home at least part of the time. Now, Okay, that's fine. It means you get a desk and you do this stuff at home. But from an employer standpoint, it also means that you don't have the connectivity with your employees you used to have. You don't get to build the culture you used to have. It means that the employee has to have different skills. That self-starter skill that we talked about, more important to be able to deal with that. The communication skills are hard. It's harder to communicate when you can't just walk over and talk to someone. You have to try harder. So the skills continue to happen. 73% of employees say they enjoy working from home, at least part-time. And so I think the new paradigm is that we're going to see people working from home. 1 in 5 plan to work at home at more than 3 times a week, more than 3 days a week going forward. And almost double that will be working from home at least 1 day a week. So our world shifted. Telemedicine might shift the entire healthcare industry. When I'm talking to hospital administrators now, they're trying to figure out how much can we do online and how much of that can be remote staff. That might change the way rural health is delivered as we go forward. And then everybody knows that we're doing more shopping online, but that ripples through and saying, well, some of us, if we step back, we can remember 15 years ago when we used to go talk about workforce and we all bemoaned the fact that everybody would be a retail worker someday in the future. Well, it turns out that maybe nobody will be a retail worker someday in the future. That it'll all, we'll go into stores and they'll be all automated, or we'll order online. Instead of being a retail worker, people will be a warehouse worker or a marketing worker. Different changes in the occupations that happen. The second thing is relocation. We've all talked about the fact that people are kind of fleeing big cities. Forbes has said that about 8% of Americans are considering a move this year, and that's multiple times what is a normal year. People are thinking about moving, and we've heard a lot nationally, a lot of people writing about this, but there's a couple factors here. First, people were leaving big cities before COVID. If you look over the last decade, the cities of over 1 million were actually net losers of domestic migration. So there are people moving in from international, and part of that sort of masked this, but they also weren't moving to rural Missouri. They weren't moving to rural North Carolina, where I am. They were moving to mid-sized cities. And so as we think about what COVID's going to do, it's going to move people around. And I fully expect that because of COVID, but also because of affordability issues and other issues, we're going to see some population shifts in America. And as that happens, the remoteness, the ability to work remotely means that somebody can work in Joplin and they're actually working for Cerner in Kansas City. And that makes sense. And how does that work as we go forward? It changes the way we approach workforce because workforce no longer is about proximity. We're going to worry about it for a long time because we continue to have very low growth in our working age population. It means that people are going to be more important. A little chart up here shows that over the last 20 years, we've not had a year where we grew our workforce by more than 0.5%. If you look back into the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we were growing by 2%. So we're growing about a quarter the rate we used to grow workers. And if we put up maps today of Missouri, which we do for Dan and a lot of the chamber people regularly, you'd see that most of your counties are going to have fewer workers in the coming years. That makes them precious. It also makes talent attraction a much bigger deal. And if you're sitting in Columbia or St. Louis at one of the universities, you know that getting people to move there is just not as easy. And it's not hard because there's something good or bad about Columbia. It's hard because people don't move and there's not many of them. And so they become even more important as we go forward. The birth rate now is at 22.7 per thousand, or I'm sorry, it was at 12 per thousand. It was almost double that 50 years ago. So this is one of the overriding things in workforce that makes it more important. And this is the population shifts. Missouri is expected over the next 10 years, unless we continue to take actions that change that, to be one of those states where you have fewer workers of prime working age than you had when you started. And you can see that's a big part of the country that way. So the ability to attract talent becomes even more important. And what they care about, most of all, the latest study is cost of living, housing affordability, health care, and the idea of jobs that might be there. And so we think about that as we go forward. Third thing is that robots are here and they're going to get more here. We were doing a lot of robots in manufacturing before. Expect to see robotics in retail, in senior centers, and a lot more in healthcare. Being able to work with those robots, program those robots, build those robots will all be part of our workforce going forward. If that scares you, technological unemployment's been here for a long time. That was the idea of that was coined in 1930 by John Maynard Keynes. He predicted that by now we'd be working 15-hour work weeks because robots would have freed us for all this leisure time. Most of us laugh at that thought, but I like the idea. I mean, I really do. I think if we can find a productivity gain out of robotics that allows us not to work as hard as we do now, we might get that balance of work and life that we're all trying to get. But there's no doubt that a lot of our tasks can be automated. And as they're automated, our jobs change as we go forward. These are my grandparents. There's four, that's my mom's and dad's parents. This is 1957, the year I was born, they took this picture. All four of them had just started their new careers. They quit being farmers for the most part, and were all textile workers. First generation textile workers in North Carolina. It looked like this. This is the kind of places they worked. And today we would say, oh God, that's terrible. They thought it was pretty good that they had a steady paycheck instead of the farm at that point. But that was manufacturing then, and this is manufacturing now. And if you don't think the job skills are different and will be different in 10, 15, 20 years from now, then you don't understand how this has been moving. There are a lot of automation possibilities that are disruption. Missouri's sort of in the middle of that group, but we can expect that we're going to have to be flexible and we're going to have to be quick with our response. Final area is how work itself works. It's the reserve activity. If I go out today, and I think we're doing business surveys right now for 4 or 5 clients, and we say, what are your needs next year? People just stare at us. They say, well, tell me when there's a vaccine. Tell me when everything goes back to normal. Tell me when the global recession ends. Tell me what's happening in politics. Everybody just stares at us. So we don't know. So I think the short-term trend that we're going to see is more reserve workers, more gig workers, more temporary, more part-time, more demand, more contract, so that businesses can raise or lower their workforce at an instant. Now, that's not the greatest thing in the world for workers, but our company is basically a gig workforce, and sometimes that works pretty well. It takes a lot of work to do it, but expect that that's the nature as we go forward. A lot of other companies have looked at what's going on with workforce. Fast Company says every worker is going to be a digital worker as we go forward. Gartner says that we're giving up efficiency for resiliency right now. It'll be more important for workers to know multiple jobs and be cross-trained. ADP talks about churn, and the Society for Human Resources says they think that we're going to more customized workers, that you're going to have narrower jobs. So Gartner and them are different. I think what we hear is that we're not sure, that different companies are going to be approaching this uncertainty in different ways. Last thing I want to talk about is data analytics. Dan's probably tired of me bringing more data to the meetings every time, but we look at data all the time because more and more people make decisions based on data. Y'all know this in higher education. People are starting to look more and more at the analytics of a college before they make a decision. People look at the analytics, whether it's the housing price or the healthcare outcomes or the schools or whatever, before they move. And companies look at analytics going forward. The issue is more interesting if you sort of merge the idea of analytics and automation. So if I ask Alexa, where the best place to work for in the next 5 years, then she doesn't know that right now because there's no predictive analytics built into her. You hear Alexa in the background in my office? She's answering my question. She's already telling me where the best place is, and we don't have AI built into her as we go forward. Think about what that means as we begin to do data analytics forward. It means you need to know all of that data about your area. This is per capita income for all the states in America and what their output is, their GDP. There's Missouri, lower end of the middle, means that an average worker in Missouri makes a lower salary, but also has a lower output as we go forward. So for Dan, the idea of how do you raise salaries in Missouri is you focus on industries that has high GDP per worker, and you train workers on that. That's using data analytics. As you can see, there's a perfect correlation here. So we know what it takes to push people up that value chain. Here's the area of states that are the leaders in moving into advanced industries right now. Advanced industries were created by Brookings. It's about 50 different areas. And you can see Missouri's almost up there. And so trying to find the attraction to those technology jobs, those higher advanced manufacturing jobs, the jobs that move people up the value chain because it moves them up the productivity chain. Now that's a lot of stuff I just threw at you right in that 2 slides, but that's the strategies to use analytics to figure out how we're going to build the economics for the future. When I look back at workforce, and like I said, as Dan said, we're doing this in a lot of places. The trends that are the most popular right now, talent attraction is huge. How do I get young people to move into my state? How do you figure out how to certify and quantify the credentials that you have? And those are credentials less than a degree, but they're also how do you certify degrees? What does it mean to have a BA in name your subject? What does that mean you know? How do we certify that? Upskilling of workers and students specifically has become a big deal, both retraining of workers, but also putting specific skills in students. A lot of focus on new population, some of that in Missouri around people who are transitioning from the military, people who are transitioning out of prison, dislocated youth that are 18 to 25 and aren't currently working or in school. A lot of people trying to figure out how you make that match to move them on. We bemoan regularly that students just don't have a career plan. Well, we don't do a very good job of trying to help them understand that. We're getting better, but we also need to raise awareness for parents. What are the jobs of the future? I've told everyone my career plan when I was in elementary school was I wanted to be a cowboy. I like cowboys. I wanted to be a cowboy. We had a horse. I thought that was cool. Nobody told me that for a while that cowboys didn't make a lot of money and I probably needed to move out west and all that. My mother wanted me to be a lawyer. The reason she wanted me to be a lawyer, lawyers seem to make a lot of money. Neither of those were particularly good career plans. And when I got in school, I sort of tripped over statistics and public policy and ended up there. But it wasn't because we had awareness. So the last trend is those big data dives that drive everything as we go forward. The more we can learn about what's really happening out there, the better we can make strategic plans to move forward. Scenario planning is going to be more important than ever because in our world today, there's uncertainty and disruption every minute of the day. If you want the best components for a workforce system, real-time comprehensive information that basically everybody knows is a key. The resources and information to develop that excellent supply chain. So we need strong early childhood education. We need funded K through 16 training programs. We need higher education that delivers the type of employees we need that drive a lot of the rest of our productivity. And we need parents that know. And then finally, things that y'all do and that Dan does and others, we need that collaborative capacity in a state and the clout that it brings to bridge these complexities, to solve the problems of contradicting goals and to fix those problems and to be the glue and the grease. You have to have that in a state. It doesn't work if you don't. Our bottom line here is we say that change is accelerating every day, competition's increasing, and serendipity is just not a strategy. And so the states that are out there with a strategy moving forward are the ones that are going to be successful as we go forward. I also, like Dr. Choi and Marshall, want to congratulate Dan and his team for being a business voice that gets the workforce issue and for going in and whether it's helping teachers understand what's happening in the K-12 system or dealing with apprenticeships or doing the thing that everybody says is needed, which is work experience through their intern program. The state's making a difference at the state chamber, and it's something that we need because unless you're trying hard to be better than the next person, you're not going to compete in a world that is this change driven and also this competitive. So I'll stop there and look forward to the conversation. Thank you very much.
And I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Ted. Wonderful comments. I recall as you were talking when you came by and visited me when you were in Missouri, meeting with the chamber, and we had a great conversation. And just hearing you talk about those trends and those things we need to be thinking about, I really picked up on this idea of the future of work, which I think really framed it very nicely. That it's remote, it's relocation, it's robots, and it's in terms of the resource. I mean, where are those workers going to be and how that looks? The look of how we do things in the future is definitely going to be different. And those that can adjust and be nimble and be flexible and have a strategy around that. Also, one of the things that really came out strong to me was the importance of collaboration, that we're all in this, whether it be higher education, community college, K-12, pre-K, the business community, we're all in this together, and we've got to have these kind of convenings that force us to think about what role we can play. What's our lane? How can we collaborate, do our part, and then together move where we need to be. So great comments. It's great to see you again. I'm always glad to hear from you because truly one of the great thought leaders in this kind of work in the country. You just happen to be from North Carolina. So, but it's truly amazing the work you're doing, and I'm glad you're working with our great colleagues here in Missouri. You know, we're going to pivot over and have a panel discussion now with some great thought leaders as well, people that have been listening in, that have worked with us in different ways, their organizations or them individually. And I'm really glad to introduce to you some panelists that are going to be joining me here for a conversation around what we've heard Ted talk about and then how it's impacting their industry and their industry sectors. So Amanda Cooper, Vice President of Corporate Services with MFA Incorporated, is going to be joining us. Peter Callan, who is the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition Development for MU Healthcare. Again, a great colleague and someone that I've gotten to know here at MU. Jeanette Hernandez Pringer, who is CEO of EcoSelect. I'm really glad to have you with us, Jeanette. And then also Valerie Patton, Senior Vice President for Inclusion and Talent Attraction, Executive Director of the St. Louis Business Diversity Initiative. Critically important work she's involved in, and we're just delighted to have all of you with us today. So it's good to see your faces on the screen. I can see you're there, and what we'll ask you to do is we'll ask some questions. I'll kind of sprinkle those around, and as we go around, certainly feel free to jump in, and let's make this a good conversation today. And we know there may be some questions coming in as well, so there may be some that we're able to pick up from our audience today. But I'm going to lead off, and I'll just start with our first person. Amanda, I introduced you first, so we'll start there. Let's talk about the challenges that you're facing at MFA in terms of current and future workforce. What are the things that are affecting your industry today?
Okay, so MFA we are an agriculture retailer and wholesaler. So we are in approximately 135 locations in Missouri and outside in contiguous states. I would say our biggest challenges that we face right now, some of it is just geography. We're in a lot of small communities. And so we need to attract individuals to our towns. So I appreciated what Ted said about people leaving big cities and wanting to move out of that. That's good for us. But then that translates into our second challenge. If we have people that want to move to our small communities and work for us, often they have a spouse that also needs to work. The challenge then becomes, how do they work remotely? Because if we don't have the broadband access, can't get internet, it's hard for the spouse to work from home. And so that creates some challenges then when it comes to recruitment, because we can't provide an atmosphere where both people in the household could work and be successful. I would say probably the third challenge that's big for us right now is what we call a seasonal work-life balance. As you can imagine, being in agriculture, we are very seasonal. And so there are times where we ask our people to work hard. There are also times where it's a lot slower, and sometimes it's hard finding that work-life balance. Both finding it for our people, but as an employer finding it. So we want people to have great balance, but it's how do you have the staffing to accommodate the busy times and then also not be overstaffed in the slower times. So I would say those are probably our three biggest challenges right now.
Awesome. Great comments in terms of looking at that ag sector and how important that is here in Missouri. We all know that, and you're kind of like we are in that we have people all over the place, and we, in extension, face many of those same challenges that you're talking about. It's the same line. We probably need to talk some more about how we can line that up better, because you bring up some things that I think about every single day. Peter, give me some sense when you look at the Same question, but really thinking about the healthcare industry. I know you and I have talked a couple times about this. What are some of those challenges you face?
Good morning, everybody. MU Healthcare is an academic health system here in Colombia with about 10,000 employees. And like every health system across the country, we had a shortage of workers before COVID, but now that need has been greatly amplified because of the need. We're full pretty much every day. When I look at this and I look at this challenge every day of getting talent, I see our workforce in three bands or three levels. Level 3 is those licensed degree professionals, the pharmacists, nurses, doctors, therapists. We need more of them, and however, there are lots and lots of processes and plans in place to get more of them, both into schools and into employment. And at the core staff, level 1 we call it, those people who are paid entry-level wages of $25,000 to $35,000 a year, housekeepers, food service, drivers, nursing assistants, we can get all day long. We get tons of applicants, no trouble getting. Challenges finding good people and then having them stay with us for a long time. The area that's the biggest challenge for us is, I call that middle band. Those are those roles that do not necessarily need a degree, but they need a skill or they need a certification, maybe an associate degree. Roles like a laboratory technician, an analyst, a virtual care assistant, a surgical technician. And for those, I find that we can talk later on about some of the things we're doing to get those and to develop those. But those for us, when I look into the long term, I see approaches in our society for the level 3, the licensed and degree people. We know we can get people in our door, but how do we fill all those large number of needs in the middle? And many of the roles that Ted mentioned that I think are going to be roles in the future of analysts and AI and robotics and independent thinkers are going to be primarily in that middle level role. So that's some of the things that we're looking at.
And Jeanette, again, thinking about this same area of a challenge, and as a CEO, obviously you're looking at it through a different lens. I'd love to hear your perspectives.
Well, I feel very fortunate in that our industry is professional services. We supply IT resources and talent to Fortune 1000 companies and government agencies. So we have a different workforce than some of the others. We don't have low-paying wages. We have a highly experienced, educated workforce. The challenge right now with that I'm hearing from our workforce is isolation, the ability to really hone their soft skills. They are desperate for human interaction. And it's interesting, our millennials or younger people are actually the ones that want to come into the office. They seek that ability to collaborate. I also think that working from home, for those that enjoy it, that's great. But for those who really need that social interaction, professional development, feeling they have somebody they can go to for coaching, sponsorship, those things are now kind of being held back. They're not able to get that interface and that affirmation, advice, and so forth as readily as they did pre-COVID. So that's a particular challenge. We have the technology, tools, and software for productivity. We use Teams and Zoom, and people, we like to say we're Zoomed out, because you're sitting in front of a monitor, and it's great to see the smiling faces and to talk and put things up on the screen, but it doesn't replace that human interaction and being able to really read body language. And then, of course, the bigger the meeting, the harder it is to collaborate and make sure everybody is able to be heard without talking over each other.
Great insights, and especially when you think about the generational differences in different parts of our population. Millennials see the world through a different lens than, say, a baby boomer did, perhaps. But again, that human interaction is obviously a challenge you're facing. Valerie, I'd be interested in the challenges you're seeing and what you're seeing in your sector as you think about these critical issues of diversity and inclusion.
So what we are experiencing in a large metropolitan area such as St. Louis is the upskilling, reskilling opportunity, especially for Black and Brown communities. So that would be more of what we are facing and the challenge. I think we have talent here, but the access to opportunities, some of that being borne by transportation issues, but also just general education issues. So that would probably be one of the larger challenges we have. How do we get the Black and Brown communities included into the available opportunities within the region, not only at an entry level, but also at a mid-level?
Critically important, and definitely something we see in society really right now. This is right top of line here. I'm going to mix it up a little bit here. Peter, I'm going to go back to you with something you mentioned. You talked about a middle band that you're trying to figure out how to deal with, a type of worker that you're trying to focus on. What are some strategies maybe that you're trying to think about here that you might see that maybe this is working or something we've got to work on even better?
About 5 years ago, when we came to this realization that we just could not find some of these people for these certified type roles, and we started something called the Career Institute here at NU Healthcare. And the concept was, let's take those people in level one, those entry-level staff that we know are full of potential, bright, dedicated workers, but never got a break or never got an opportunity. And we designed a program to train them both online and didactic, either online or in class, and then supplement that with hands-on training, much like the old style apprenticeship program. And we started off with a pilot of 2 roles, medical assistants, which are like LPNs, and neurodiagnostic technicians, the people who do sleep studies. That was a real success the first time. So it's since expanded that, and we now have 12 different tracks. And by the end of this year, we will have people being trained to become a plumber, electrician, a registered nurse, laboratory tech. And it's pretty awesome. By the end of the year, we'll have 120 people finished up this. And it's helping us, certainly, meeting our needs. But everyone who graduates from one of these, no matter what the role is, we go ahead and treat them like a college graduate. We rent a large auditorium, caps, gowns, walk across the stage, and it's absolutely the best day of my year every year, because we're meeting our needs selfishly as NU Healthcare, but we're also transforming lives and absolutely moving people out of poverty. And it's a drop in the bucket for us, but I think we now have proven that the concept works. And now we're seeing how can we expand this to more professions, but how do we do it more for our entry-level people? As we know we can get people in the door, how do we then skill them up ourselves? And with partners like Columbia College and Job Point and the Career Center, local partners that we have. That's one thing we've done that we are enjoying doing.
Well, good insights, Peter. And again, that's the health sector. You know, Amanda, I'd be interested in going back to you. You talked about the difficulty you have in getting people perhaps to go into some rural areas. And a lot of folks on this telecast today understand rural. We got a lot of folks joining us today that are very concerned about that. Are there some strategies or some things that you guys are thinking about and trying to change that? Or maybe there's some critical needs that you see on the ground that's got to be, you kind of got into that a little bit, but where do you see that rural workforce? What are the needs there? Maybe what are some things you're trying to do around that at MFA?
Some of the main things we're trying to do is basically kind of grow our own. So we recognized what we need and going out and trying to develop that, probably a lot like along the same lines as what Peter's doing in a roundabout way. We start out with internship programs and things like that we end up hiring about a third of every year, a third of our class. So that's been a good strategy for us, but we're also teaming up with some educational institutions in the state to develop programs that are specific to our needs and what we need. So for example, we have a great program we've started with State Tech. We're trying to appeal to the parents of students. We're offering scholarships that pay 100% for their education if they go through and complete it in exchange for 3 years of guaranteed employment with us. So trying to do some things like that entice young people to get in to our business. And then our goal is to make sure that we have the culture and the environment and those kind of things that really grab a hold of them and make them want to grow and stay with us. We're also trying to reach out a lot to, I would say, high schools and make sure that not only the agriculture teachers, but the guidance counselors understand the careers that we have available, understand the earning potential that's in our careers. Because what we found is that a lot of times Sometimes schools are pushing individuals to go to get a 4-year degree and go to these types of careers that are not ag related. And so we're trying to just do more education.
So when you think about that, and again, I want to pivot back around here to Valerie. Valerie, obviously you're in a metro area, so we're contrasting a little bit of rural and metro here. And you really touched on your comment around trying to bring in a more diverse body into the workforce in that pipeline. Give us some sense of what you see maybe that our folks that are listening in could be a part of that conversation. How can we all get involved to help you and others that are in that space trying to do that work?
Well, to help, one, we have to have education systems that are providing not only formal education, but what I will call technical education. So making sure that those requirements for entry are equitable across the board. That would be one around education. Also, making the opportunities that are available known in those Black and Brown communities through churches, through workforce development agencies, but really, forming partnerships and alliances and collaborations with groups that traditionally they would not have formed with in those Black and Brown communities. You have ethnic chambers, such as Hispanic Chamber, Asian Chamber, but also going into those communities through recreation centers, through churches, through vehicles in which they have not in the past. Also, making sure that whatever is offered with the people, for the people, not necessarily making people feel as if it is, we're doing this because we have to, or this is the right thing to do. But it really is working with the people and for the people to find out what their needs are. And then at that point in time, seeing what opportunities may be available.
Excellent insights, and I think a lot of our folks can really gain from that, because the things you're talking about, we all have to be engaged in, and we have to be careful that we're not doing it just to check off a box because we're supposed to do it, but it's really about trying to bring community and bring that inclusive concept into what will be a better workforce, and more we'll get to share in the economy. So great insights. I wanted to go back to Jeanette. You brought up a very interesting point about this millennial workforce, and I see it every day as well in my work. They do come at the world different. What you're talking about in terms of them wanting to get back in office, in many cases, they desire that connection, and it's not exclusive to that generation, but certainly we see it. How do you see us dealing with that in this COVID and hopefully someday post-COVID environment? Ted talked about the percentage that are going to stay at home and not maybe returning to what we call normal work as we've known it. How do you see us dealing with that? Strategies around that?
Well, I know one of the strategies that we're using right now is hybrid ways to work so that we can maintain physical distance and have a safe environment for our associates. We are encouraging them to break off into smaller groups, so creating almost like their own work bubble. We all have our little bubble right now, right? When we know who we will interact with socially, but we also trust that they're not going outside of the bubble and maybe posing health dangers to us right now. I believe that the way a hybrid would work best for those who really crave being in the office until we have a solution for the pandemic is making sure that they feel comfortable, that they can have that interaction with those in a bubble. The other solution we've had is that going into a bigger group. So you have your smaller group, you have your bubble, you're in a bigger group, and we actually have enough real estate because so many people are gone, in which we make sure that those areas are safe for them as far as disinfecting, and they're physically distant, but they're in the same room, able to get up and grab a cup of coffee, draw on a bulletin, draw on a whiteboard. So it gives them a little bit of a semblance of what it was like before COVID hit. So those are a couple of strategies that we're using. Post-COVID, we will allow people to work in the manner that makes them most productive, whether it's a hybrid, working from home full-time, or working in the office full-time. So I think what this has allowed us to do is understand that we can forecast now into the future, and with the growth of our company, and I think a lot of companies are thinking this way, that they may not need the amount of real estate that they might have thought they needed, because they will not have the amount of people in their workspace at any given time. I think it will give people comfort also in knowing, as they go through different chapters in their life, that there are options for them to be productive without feeling that they have to be stuck in traffic going to and from the workplace. So I think in a way there's a silver lining, but being very cognizant of what works best for your industry and for your particular institution, to make it so that people feel good about their productivity and they can count on each other, and yet they're able to do something that makes them want to continue to work at their place of employment.
Very good thoughts, and I'm going to go back to Ted now. Ted, I think you're still with us, and one of the things that I wanted to do was let this group kind of lay out a lot of stuff, because I think that's helpful to you and your work in the chamber. But as you said earlier, and I wrote this down, everybody wants a fix. That was one thing right off the bat you said. And the other thing was that we all face complexity paralysis, so we get to a point where we just throw up our hands. But one of the things you talked about, I think it was in Tennessee, where they really have created a destination idea of we create destinations where people want to live. You also talked about people wanting to move back to rural or small town America. Can you give us some more insight? Because I think all of these leaders would gain from that. I know everyone listening in would as well.
So I think that what you've just heard over the last 20 minutes is very typical of what we hear from businesses, that they're trying lots of different things. Amanda talked a little bit about the challenges in rural, but she started off with the idea that broadband is now necessity. You can't actually do much of any of this unless you have broadband. So if you get out a broadband map right now of reliable high-speed broadband in your state, you can pretty much know where growth isn't going to happen. So start there. But I think the complexity issue, as Valerie was saying, urban complexities are different than rural complexities, but they're still there. They're still part of this. Businesses have to be part of a give and take. I think we are. I look like I'm the oldest person on the panel. We look like a time. Okay, Peter. Well, you could try, but I'm not sure. I think we're at a time where what was in 1980, when I had my first job, isn't the way life is anymore. It isn't the way business works. It isn't the way people try to balance their lives. And as we go forward, it's going to continue to change. A lot of that's good. We talk a lot about millennials wanting things different, but most of my staff are millennials. They're more adaptable. They're easier to integrate with technology. They're not the least bit spooked by dealing with anybody. I mean, there are a huge number of positives with the new workforce, if you will. And by the way, millennials are sort of rolling in huge numbers. The Zs are already right behind them, and we're already hiring. I've got my first Z on my team now, and they're even a little different. They were born with social media the day they were 2, kind of things. They're just a different world. So I think as we look forward, for this call today, one of the questions is, what's everybody's role in the new ecosystem? Because talent has a new ecosystem, and that Amanda, we use the term rooted. on those programs that you do with younger people as they're moving through schools. In fact, we do a whole program called What Fertilizer Really Does for You in Workforce. And if you can get them rooted, there's a lot of 18-year-old, 19-year-olds that if the path's laid out and it looks like a good path and you like the company, great, we're there. It works well. So this is not one of those passive business times where you just sit back and gather employees. I also agree with Peter completely. The middle skill area is the hardest. They're not the hardest to please. I think your surgeons are probably in that top group. We always tell people, if you want to understand a community's attractiveness for talent, go first to the hospital head of HR and ask them how it is to recruit a frontline worker, a specialty nurse, and a surgeon. And if you can answer that question, you actually know exactly how talent looks at your community. So these are complex times, but it sounds like everybody on the call is doing their piece. I'd add one last thing, which is if you have the capacity to do all of this, then you're going to win. It's the small mid-size that doesn't have 5 minutes a day to spare to do this stuff that are having the hardest time out there. Small business recruitment of new employees, it is all about friends and family now, and the rest of this is really difficult. So I think that's another area that we need specialty programs through our education institutions and others that have a concierge in the middle for small mid-sized businesses that would help them with this. That's a real issue out in the public today.
You know, Ted, one of the things you talked about, and I want to open this up for a little bit broader aperture and conversation, is in one of the concepts that you visited with us about earlier was this idea of future skills. And that nimbleness and ability to pivot and go into something new. That life is not going to be just a straight line. It's going to be squiggly, and you're going to have to be flexible and nimble, and you're going to have to move with it when it changes. Ted, would you talk a little deeper about that? And then I'm going to warn the panelists, I want to know how that's affecting your different sectors. So that future skill piece, would you dig a little deeper on that?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to envision is future skills around dealing with automation or technology. So I tell the story that when I was in high school, I was not allowed to take typing. I went to a small town in North Carolina. There was one typing teacher, and because I was on the college track and would never need to be able to type, they wouldn't let me take typing. My mother was worked in an office, and she thought I should learn, but because nobody would ever need to type, that went to college, I couldn't do it. We don't know what the next skills are. There was a time, maybe it was Peter's time, where there were, people running around doing all the work for you to support you on a regular basis, and what they did freed you from doing other things. We all have some of that today, but it's different. We're going to have to learn those things. And as we think about sort of the next set, today you could be pretty insulated and only deal with a few customers, but your staff look different. They're of every race, they're of everything. Just think different. And we've got 5 generations in the workforce, so you have to be able to work with people differently. If they're different from you, then it's about work. It's about how you build camaraderie and teamwork. It used to be we siloed. Now we have all sorts of integrated teams. Each of those things is a whole different level of how we work. But as we go forward, we can predict some of that. But I'd take a bet that none of us can think of half the things that are going to change our workforces going forward. And so go rent your copy of the Jetsons. It was 1962. Watch all the episodes from the Jetsons and realize just how much they got right. And then the things that we haven't got there yet, except for the flying car, ignore that. But except for the flying car, figure out that that's the way. George had a job where he pushed a button 3 times a day, 3 days a week, and that was his full-time job. I'm holding out for the John Maynard Keynes 15-hour-a-week work week. That's the one I want, and that if we can get there, then we're all ready.
Well, great insights, Ted. And Jeanette, I'm going to go back over to you, let you lead us off on this. He's talked about this area of intersection of human and technology, and you definitely deal in that sector. What are you seeing in that, and maybe some insights you could share that would help others that are listening in today?
Well, I hope I could be insightful, but when I started my business in 1995, the internet was just evolving. We use the term object-oriented to do fast software development projects. Fast forward, the world is totally different. Now, we're still doing modernization because technology is always changing. And so I take a look at how we are preparing our students. Technology, those higher paid jobs are around skills, a lot of them around math and science. And something that Valerie alluded to earlier is education is opportunity, especially in socioeconomic areas where they don't have access to broadband. They may not be doing their homework on a nice PC or tablet. They're working off of a cell phone, maybe a smartphone. So I personally believe we have to get down to early education. I have very young grandchildren who know how to use my cell phone better than I do. So they adapt very easily. But we need to encourage them, especially girls, with STEM curriculum, sponsorship for everyone from the time they enter school until they're ready to become an adult, whether they go to college or do some other type of activity that's in demand by our workforce. As much as technology is changing things, there are going to be certain things that will always need the human touch. So as we think about its growth, and by the way, our company has done very well. We have a lot of workforce in business intelligence, data analytics, software development, replatforming, business transformation. That's great, but what about what these kids need to know and how they're going to be able to understand that the decisions they make and the decisions we make as taxpayers on how we coach them and get them through life is going to be really important for us to be able to be successful, I think, as a country and as a world leader.
You know, your comments are great. And Valerie, I want to go to you next. As we think about this, it sounds like from what Jeanette's talking about, we've got to deal with this all the way up and down the line. This is not going to be just at the adult learner level. It's going to be going back down the pipeline. As you think about those future skills, that future skill, any thoughts you have or maybe some things you guys are trying to do to really penetrate that and to bring that out as we try to make sure everybody gets included in the future workforce?
Absolutely. So we are working in partnership with some national organizations. One is Empower. Empower is for 18 to 25-year-olds. All they have to do is have a GED. They get 22 weeks of tech training, and then we try to make sure they get an internship in that 22 weeks, and they are doing tech fundamentals. So they will be ready to do help desk and the light, those entry-level skills. Then we're also working with the National Academies Foundation, NAF, getting children from middle school through high school, what we call career ready. So we set up academies in high schools with a very defined curriculum. One may be health science, one may be technology, one may be engineering, but getting them also career ready, getting them also paid internships so they can hone those skills. Those two programs are targeted to, but of course not limited to, Black and Brown communities. They're in high schools that have high free and reduced lunch stipulations. So really reaching out into that community. We've got to spend more time and energy at looking at what will be done in the early childhood arena through probably about sixth grade. Really, how do we work and partner with the right organizations to make sure that those opportunities are there for not only learning opportunities, but skill building opportunities.
Well, it's great insights. And Amanda, I want to give you a chance, because when you think about agriculture, a lot of people frame that in a very traditional way, but there's probably as much technology in that as any sector. As you think about that future workforce, what are some things you guys are having to do to adjust to make sure people are tech ready and have the technical skills to pivot as they need to?
We are doing a lot more in-house training on technology and just trying to make sure that people are grasping that. I mean, I feel like we've spent a lot of time on this talking about students that are coming up through education and recruiting, but we have a number of employees that are mid-career, late career employees as well. And so there's probably two things that stick out for me is curiosity. I need employees to be curious because if you're curious, you're always going to be learning. You're always going to try to be growing and developing. And the other thing is relevancy. And I see this especially with our more mature workforce is making sure that they stay relevant. I mean, God bless those folks that still have the flip phones, you know, being so hanging on to that technology, but sometimes switching to the new platforms. Those are things that we're having to go back to that group and train them on. A smartphone is really could be your friend. And so just trying to make sure that we help employees stay relevant all through their career, because if they're relevant, then it's going to be easier for them to pivot as technology changes. So making sure they understand they have a responsibility in that, but so do we to make sure that that stuff, that knowledge is available and we train them internally.
And Peter, you're going to get the last word here. I'm going to go back to you to wrap this up and talk just a minute about, again, this idea of technology and the interface with human capital and where you see that going in the future workforce that you deal with and those three different bands that you talked about.
Well, if I was elected president next Tuesday, I would spend so much time and money on developing workforce because a good paying job can honestly cure a lot of society's illnesses. But when I look to our future, we're going to need a whole lot of new skills because medicine has changed. We're going to need people with a lot of not just computer skills, but artificial intelligence skills and robotics and analytical skills and be able to work remotely and still have compassion and empathy. So I see that as a whole new band that we haven't even touched yet. We're doing some by just people who are developing themselves, but we have to spend a lot of time developing that whole skill. I go back to that middle band. I really do think that we have spent a lot of time, both as employers, society, and the educational partners of educating people that everything does not require a 4-year degree. There are many other good jobs that require a skill and a certificate, but good skills. I think the last point I have to make is because I'm also responsible for the diversity. I think no matter what business anyone is on who's listening to this, that your business will thrive if you have a more diverse workforce. So to do that, I think I look at the demographics of our rural Missouri and who's going to college or any type of post-high school education and in our cities as well. We really have to do a much different job of attracting people in and keeping them as well. So if elected on Tuesday, I'll be spending all my time on these three things.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being with us. Peter, I love your South Missouri accent always. You know I give you a hard time about that. Amanda, thank you for being with us. Jeanette and Valerie, equally so. You guys have done a terrific job. And Ted, thank you. It's always good to hear a North Carolina accent too. So we've had a wonderful panel today, and I want to close this up by just offering a couple reflections. One is I want to come back to something that was talked about earlier, and that's broadband. You know, broadband is a big rural issue, and we all know that. But I want to remind us all there are areas in urban that don't have broadband. There are areas in Boone County right here that still do not have high-quality broadband. There's areas definitely in St. Louis County. I've seen it there. I've been in areas of Kansas City, same thing. So we need to really think about these as not so much sometimes rural or urban issues, but really think about this as a Missouri issue. And workforce development clearly binds us together to think about our community as a state and what we can do together. You know, we are very fortunate as we think about the next step in this to have some wonderful people at the state and federal level that work with us very closely. You heard from our governor a little earlier who's deeply committed to this and has made this one of the centerpieces of his work, and as he talks about workforce development, and he also talks about infrastructure, which a piece of that is definitely broadband. But we're also equally glad that we have a U.S. Senator, Roy Blunt, who has been kind enough to share a short video with us today to talk about our work in workforce development. After he finishes, we'll be taking a short break. We'll ask you to come back at 10:30 for the remainder of our session here, and we'll kind of wrap things up here. Make sure you take the live poll and be a part of that as well. So we'll go to the Senator Roy Blunt video, and then we'll be reconvening for furthering this conversation. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Roy Blunt. Oh, wow, this is another first for me, joining you without being there, something we've all done a lot of lately. But I'm so glad to be able to recognize the great work MU Extension does for our state and does as you continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And now more than ever, we want to create an environment in our state where people who have specific skills can come and go to work right away. We want to ensure Missourians that have the skills we need to meet our workplace needs and to meet our community needs. The greater your skill set, the more choice you have in finding the job you'd like to do, that pays the wage you'd like to have and allows you to live where you want to live. We want to be the easiest state to transfer your skills when you move here. Whether you're a spouse of a military member who's temporarily assigned here or a veteran retiring to our state in what you hope will be a long retirement. Or if you're just simply transferring the things you learned in the military to the private sector. Or anyone who wants to work in our state should be able to have the easiest pathway forward that we can possibly create. A major part of any discussion right now, by the way, on workforce development has to include broadband. From distance learning to telehealth to simply be able to check in on family and friends, the pandemic has added an even greater urgency for the need for access to broadband and for rural broadband. Still, it's almost a third of rural Missourians don't have access to reliable high-speed internet. Expanding access to broadband will be vital for families, for farmers, for small business owners, and as we move from the rescue phase of the pandemic to the recovery phase, this investment will have to get us where we need to be a step closer to ending the digital divide. In order to grow and thrive, communities need reliable access to modern broadband services. In my opinion, having modern broadband connections today is as important as having the telephone was 70 years ago. And it'll make a big difference in whether people are able to live in the kind of smaller Missouri communities and rural areas that many people would like to live in. It'll continue to be one of the most important tools as those communities reach out, and frankly, it'll just make the difference in whether people have the ability to live in a community where sports events and community events and church events and what happened at the baseball game on the weekend still are things that are talked about. In some parts of the country prior to the pandemic and prior to distance learning, we'd not really gotten into what we needed to do in terms of either distance or telemedicine. We'd used a little of it, but not nearly like we should have been. And frankly, the past few months have really shown us that these services can provide a high quality of service without a high quality of effort on the part of the healthcare provider or the patient. For individuals and families on the wrong side of the digital divide, the need for modern broadband access has really only been more clear over the course of this year. In policy circles, on the Senate Appropriations Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee, I'm going to continue to do everything I can to see that we close this gap and we continue to build on the experience of the last year. The University of Missouri Extension plays a key role in supporting local communities, whether by providing access to data with its All Things Missouri website, or promoting educational resources for farmers, or driving discussions on the need to expand internet service. Extension connects Missourians all over the state with the university and the vast resources available through the university. I want to thank all of you for letting me be part of your annual meeting, and thank you for your unwavering support for our local communities. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in person soon.